Hi, I am Shinamil Tampos and I'm gonna discuss the principles of sampling. So the first principle of sampling is that appraisals that involve sampling are estimates and predictions only. Yes, it is understandable. Number two is that estimates based on sampling are least accurate when the sample is a small proportion of the whole and when the sample is not representative. Conversely, estimations based on proportionately large samples and on representative samples are most accurate. Sample means the portion of a population taken as the subject of the study of a study. So a sample is representative if it is taken from all sections or groups of a population in equal proportion. The third principle of sampling is that sampling may be categorical or temporal. So sampling is categorical if the sample is taken proportionally from categories or groups. On the other hand, sampling is temporal when the sample in terms of time. For example, the pulse of a patient is taken every 10 minutes. So, it involves time in if the sampling is temporal. Let's move on to the disadvantages of sampling or defective sampling. So the first disadvantage of sampling is if sampling is biased or not representative or too small, the conclusion may not be valid and reliable. So for example, suppose the teaching of science is to be studied in a certain high school with the students from first to fourth year. So they are the respondents. The population or universe consists of all the high school students. A portion of 20% are to be taken as the respondents. So that portion, the 20% that will be taken is our sample. Suppose the students are divided into sections according to ability. If the students are lumped up together or combined, and then the 20% will be taken from the whole, the sampling is biased and not representative because more might be taken from one section or there may be more males than females. No? It is unbalanced. Okay, number two. In research, the respondents to a study or the sample must have a common characteristic, which is the basis of the study. If some of the sample do not have this common characteristic, the conclusions become faulty. In the example given in number 1, the common characteristic of the sample or population is that all of them are high school students. If some college students enter the sample, then the conclusions may become erroneous. Number 3, if the population is very large and there are many sections and subsections, the sampling procedure becomes very complicated. It would be difficult to assign numbers to the elements or members of the population due to its size. It's very big, very large. It's hard to assign. Number 4, if the researcher does not possess the necessary skill and technical know-how in sampling procedure, the sampling may become biased and unrepresentative. So, the researcher has to take its part also. Next, we will about to tackle the general types of sampling. So, there are two types of sampling, general types of sampling, which are the probability sampling and the non-probability sampling. In probability sampling, the sample is a proportion, a certain percent of the population, and such sample is selected from the population by means of some systematic way in which every element of the population has a chance of being included in the sample. On the other hand, in non-probability sampling, the sample is not a proportion of the population and there is no system in selecting the sample. just the opposite of the probability sampling. In non-probability sampling, the selection depends upon the situation. So, let's tackle about types of non-probability sampling. There are 3 types of non-probability sampling, as you can see there in the screen: accidental sampling, the quota sampling, and the convenience sampling. First, let's tackle about the accidental sampling. In this type of sampling, there is no system of selection, but only those whom the researcher or interviewer meet by chance are included in the sample. For example, the interviewer stands in a street corner and he interviews everyone who passes by. So the sample might be biased one. If the interviewer stands in a place of business section, then most of the people, of the respondents, are businessmen and rich people. And on the other hand, if the interviewer stands in a slum area, then most of the people who pass by and interviewed are poor people. So, in research, every section of the population being studied must be proportionally represented in the sample. And also, accidental sampling is resorted to only when there is no other alternative. So, that is accidental sampling. The next type of sampling is the quota sampling. In this type of sampling, specified numbers of persons of certain types are included in the sample. Suppose the reactions of the people towards a certain issue is to be determined and a cross-section of the population must be involved. It might be decided that 10 doctors, 8 lawyers, 15 businessmen, 20 vendors, and 25 farmers should constitute the sample. No. The advantage of quota sampling over accidental sampling is that many sectors of the population are represented. However, its representativeness is doubtful because there is no proportional representation and there are no guidelines in the selection of the respondents. Any one of the groups selected to participate will be included in the sample. Another danger is that the perception of the minority may become typical in the findings. And again, quota sampling may be used only when any of the more desirable types of sampling will not do. The third one is the convenience sampling. So, in this sampling, convenience sampling is a process of picking out people in the most convenient and fastest way to immediately get their reactions to a certain hot and controversial issue. For example, if there's a hot and controversial issue, for example, the raising of the price of gasoline, the most convenient and fastest way of reaching people is by the telephone, to be able to interview them at once. So, the interviewer contacts people who have telephones and then ask about their reactions regarding to the issue at hand. So, this type of sampling is certainly biased and not representative at all, considering that the people who have telephones are a class by themselves, and so their views cannot be considered as views of the people. It's not representative at all. No? It should be noted that even in ordinary data gathering in research, interviews can also be conducted through the telephone, provided that those interviewed by telephone are only among those who are properly selected to be included in the sample. It only happens that these people have telephones. So, how about those people that doesn't own some telephone? Right? It is not representative at all, and it's obviously biased, that type of sampling. So thank you and Godspeed, everyone. Thank you.